Well, the operative word is Krishnanushilana. What is favorable to the culture of Krishna consciousness? So there's from the first class position, the Mahabhagavata, pure devotee of the Lord, sees everything as favorable. Every wave is favorable. Nothing's unfavorable to them. Everything's a perfect arrangement of Krishna. So they cannot be brought down by bad association or any circumstance. And the third class position, they more or less think that everything is unfavorable. Their focus is very narrow, sometimes to the exclusion of devotees. Let me worship my God, and they can't deal with anybody else. Which it means it's a potentially faulty position, because it leads one to not properly respect who devotees are. And devotees are the key to Krishna consciousness. This is a religion where the emphasis is put on the devotee more than the Lord. That's what distinguishes Krishna consciousness from other, it's one of the distinguishing factors between this and other theistic systems. The maximum amount of emphasis put on the devotee of the Lord, and the devotee of the Lord as the agent of the Lord. That through the devotee you get a substantial connection. And we're told the plight of the third class devotee is to be unable to recognize who is a devotee. So much so that they may dismiss the Mahabhagavata from serious consideration. To mistake a Mahabhagavata for a mundane person is a capital offense within Krishna consciousness. So the maximum emphasis is put on the second class position, the intermediate position. And if one has not achieved that position, we can say at least the view that is extended to us from the intermediate position, which means to judge what is favorable, what is unfavorable, which sort of association is desirable and undesirable, and all the implied gradation. We want things to be just conveniently located in black and white, yes or no. But by dint of being what it is, the intermediate position, that tells us that there's gradation. The higher rungs of third class position to the lower rungs of the higher class position, and all the gradation in between. So then what will be the criterion for acceptance or rejection? Told us Krishnanushilana Sangha, the type of association that is favorable to the culture of Krishna conception. So, in some context, we could say, the Vishnu Bhaktas association is undesirable in a higher sense. Why? Because it's not leading toward Krishna culture, per se. So we find in the Brihad Bhagavatamritam that Gopakumar is counseled, cautioned, observes along the way that even within Vaikuntha, he may not be accommodated. There may be unfavorable association for him there. Srila Guru Maharaj said about himself once, he said, I am a man who, if I was in Vaikuntha, would be a troublemaker. Right? Because venting his Krishna conception would create some imbalance in the mind of Vishnu Bhaktas. Just as when Mahaprabhu, he's meeting with Venkatabhatta in South India, and we're told they're associating happily for so much time, so many months. And then one day Mahaprabhu says to him, why is it, because he's a Sri Vaishnava, a Vishnu Bhakta, devotee of Lakshmi Narayan, why is it that your Lakshmi Devi wants to have rasa with my Krishna? So, before getting into any sort of analysis, what this tells us is that to a certain degree, up to this point, they're more or less agreeing on everything. What is favorable, what's unfavorable, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what's higher or lower, all of these things, there's agreement up to a point. But now comes a separation. Saying, why does your Lakshmi Devi want to have rasa with my Krishna? So it means some finer type of analysis will now be applied than what was existing previously. Things will have to be reconceived in a new way. Venkatabhatta's response first is that, well, Siddhantically speaking, they're the same. Vishnu and Krishna, they're identical from a particular type of analysis. And Mahaprabhu at first said, all right, that's okay, that's acceptable. But that doesn't answer the question why she is not given entrance into these pastimes. So he's taking the analysis to a deeper level of what's favorable, unfavorable, acceptable, unacceptable. So that we have to become acquainted with. Right? Those who are members or aspiring members of the Chaitanya Saraswat Mat have to become, inevitably, have to become acquainted with the conceptions of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. Otherwise, what is the point? Unless you say, well, I just want to do some service. He's such a great, exalted devotee, I want to do some service. That's okay, that's acceptable too. You say, it's beyond me, but I just know he's a great devotee, I feel that, I want to offer myself in service. That's also acceptable. As Guru Maharaj said, a third-class devotee can bypass the second-class position, which is more of an analytical one, and go directly to first class through service to the first class devotee. So that's also acceptable. But for those who are naturally inquisitive, they're asking so many questions, considering so many things, why should they avoid becoming acquainted with the concepts of Srila Guru Maharaj and his standards? Say, no, at another mat they do this, or another guru told that. That's all right. But that's not for the members of the Chaitanya Saraswat Mat, for whom he is the ultimate authority. Right? Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj's whole idea in organizing seva is to serve the lotus feet of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. Not that it should shift to somewhere else, or some other idea, or some other guru, or some other conception. That is never his idea. That it can never be the idea of the Chaitanya Saraswat Mat. Where Srila Sridhar Maharaj, his concepts are what form the substance of what this mat is. Without that, it's a shell or a caricature of its former self. Then it becomes indistinguishable between any one of a number of mats, theistic institutions, in India and around the world. What makes it unique? What makes it unique are Guru Maharaj's conceptions, his standards about, his guides, his advice about what is acceptable, what is unacceptable, what is desirable, what is undesirable. He is our absolute standard for making these judgments. So that somewhere else another standard is employed, that is not the concern of the members of the Chaitanya Saraswat Mat. For example, when Guru Maharaj says, I do not allow any Julan yatra in my mat. That means placing the deities of Radha and Krishna on a swing and then swinging them and inviting so many people to have kirtan, to offer flowers, to do so many things. Right? This is a legitimate pastime of Radha and Krishna. He's saying, I don't allow that in my mat. He said, others will say, on what's acceptable, unacceptable, favorable, unfavorable, they will say, oh, this brings many people to the mat. And then those people, they offer flowers to the deities, and they give some donation, and so we're doing that. Guru Maharaj say, this is too high for me. I will not use those higher pastimes to serve me. Right? And he quoted the sloka of Mahaprabhu in Shikshastakam. Nadanam najanam nasundarim kavitamba jagadisha kamaye. Mama janmani janmani shure bhavatad bhaktira hoituki tvai. The argument that something brings more people, more money, Guru Maharaj said, that's rejected by Mahaprabhu as a standard of favorable criteria. So it's a very fine point. We can say, no, but in another place, another guru told. That's another thing. If you say, yes, that may be well and good, but what did Srila Sridhar Maharaj say about these things? If you claim to be in his line or an aspiring servitor in his line, then you must accept his judgment about these things. Whose devotional eye shall we see through? Premanjana charita bhakti vilochanena santak sadeva hridayeshu vilokayanti. We're told to see through the lens of the eye of devotion. Whose eye? Whose devotion? What standard? And we say, oh, Raghunath Das Goswami, he rejected the buttermilk in the leaf cup from Saki's stall. You go, but we don't have to be that fanatical. Some kind of fanatic. Well, what kind of a fanatic is he? He's the Prayojan Tattva of the Acharya of the Rupanuga line. Right? So is this some fanatical behavior on his part? He doesn't know how to act properly. He doesn't understand how the world works. And this won't be very favorable for preaching and donation collection. Right? That Raghunath Das Goswami fanatic guy doesn't understand, the validity of other beliefs. Or is it that he clearly understands all these things? And out of a natural, from his heart outward, the dismissive gesture comes. Not from the mind of a third-class fanatic, but from someone occupying the highest position and standard of Krishna consciousness. We're told that Mahaprabhu, we say, Patita Pavana Goda Hari. He's the Mahavananaya avatar. He's the most merciful, most munificent, magnanimous incarnation of God. But Upasiddhanta makes him angry. We go, oh, look, come on, get off it. Why be so fanatical about this stuff? I mean, they're trying. No, if Upasiddhanta comes to his ear, he becomes enraged. So much so that Srup Damodar has to filter everything first, so it will not come to the ear of the Mahavadanaya avatar, Patita Pavana Gora Hari, and put him in a fit of rage. So here we learn, for the higher, the more subtle things are intolerable. Gross things do not bother them. When they said to Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj, how can you stand to live near an outhouse? He said, how can you stand to be surrounded by the stench of the minds of materialists that you associate with every day? I prefer the stench of the outhouse. That's an externally objectionable thing. But the stench of the mentality of these people with whom you embed yourself and associate with them, how can you tolerate that? So the more refined someone's concept of Krishna consciousness is, subtle deviations are more objectionable to them. We hear Guru Maharaj give the example of, perhaps it was Kalidas, the poet, that when he was abducted and enlisted as a palki bearer, a palanquin bearer for some time. And so there's, say, 4 or 6 men, they're carrying this palanquin, and there's a king on the top. And they're going along, and this, he's not used to this, his body is delicate, the pole is digging into his skin, making it raw, it's cut, he's bleeding. But he's not complaining. He's going on somehow. But then that king, in a mood of self-importance and arrogant assertion, he starts to compose poetry, not realizing that one of the bearers of his palanquin is the greatest, arguably the greatest poet of all time. One of the greatest poets of all time. So he starts composing these poetic lines, and then we hear, what is Kalidas doing? Going, oh my God, I can't take it. This is unbearable. It's torture. And so they stop. And they see the bleeding arm. It looks a horrible mess. And they go, oh, you can't tolerate carrying the palanquin? He said, no, that I can tolerate. He said, what I can't tolerate is what he's doing to the language. It's torture. It's unbearable. His abuse of words and language and thought and concept. That I can't tolerate. Then they could understand they're in the presence of some extraordinary man. He has different set of criteria of what is acceptable to him, what's not acceptable, what's favorable, what's unfavorable, what's bearable, what's unbearable. So it depends on who that person is. Right? Then they discover he's the great poet Kalidas. So for those who are seriously pursuing spiritual life, they put themselves under the guidance of a qualified Vaishnava and follow their direction. Because admittedly, they'll say, I have no standard which to make these judgments by. So we're told, develop Dharma Buddhi, which you get from Sadhu Shastra Guru Vaishnav. Through Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastra Koi, Labhamatra Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhi Hoy. Through Sadhu Sangha Satovare, through superior association, you will acquire superior assessment ability. Right? It's like anything. Your judgment faculty will improve under the influence of Sadhu, Shastra, Guru, and Vaishnav, if that's what it is, not other things. So that's why we have to become acquainted with those things, or minimally at least put ourselves under the guidance of someone who is acquainted with such things. Vidyadbi Shevita Shadbi Nityam Advesha Ragibi Hridayeno Binugato Yodharmastha Nibodhata. It's the statement of Manu. So your heart may resonate in acceptance that, oh, here, I have my faith here. As I told, someone may say, I have my faith and Srila Sridhar Maharaj and his judgment, his assessment of things. We're accepting those standards as being the highest criterion for Krishnanushilana Sangha. Or put yourself under the guidance of someone who can properly represent his decisions, his standards. Have to become acquainted. To measure the value of any substance, you have to know the qualities, characteristics of that substance, or be in connection with someone who does. So I've mentioned this in regard with jewels, gold, and other things. Why do you think in the scientific world that they have so many tests? And the test, not only tests, it's not like anyone, do this test at home. There are some things like that. But other things, even to perform the test requires an expert. There are so many variables, so many subtle things to factor in and consider, that it requires an expert to conduct the test. There are many examples of that in Vedic literature as well, and in the pastimes of Mahaprabhu. So, pariksha means to examine. So to examine something, you have to be acquainted with the absolute standard by which it can be measured against, and then you can determine its relative value. So minimally, we hear a satsanga tyage vaishnavachar. A satsanga means bad association, but what? Asat, that which is of no permanent value. That's why Sukadev tells Parikshit Maharaj, Bharyanesha te prajna, Atma sanyesha sattvapi. I forget the name. He's saying, but your question, my dear king, is very good. He said, there's 1,000 questions you can ask about anything. The temporary persons, places, things of this world. But you're asking a question that's beneficial for everybody because it transcends the temporality, mundane existence. So everyone will benefit by hearing the answer to this question. Asat, that which is temporal, temporary, is not the focal point of people who are serious about spiritual culture. They're focused on sat, that which is permanent, eternal, spiritual in nature. Hare Krishna.